Welcome to day 2 of our flipped classroom. Now, yesterday you had your first experience doing these types of notes, so hopefully today you'll feel a little bit more comfortable with it. Today we're going to be talking about Native American cultural groups. Who were they and where were they located? In order to understand U.S. history, we have to know what was here before the U.S. was formed, before colonists started coming over. That's going to be important in future units when we start having conflicts between groups. It's important to know that culture of the people who were here first. Now, throughout these notes, there are going to be a lot of bullet points on each screen. You do not need to write everything you see. Use your discretion to decide what you think is most important. So our first group is California. Coastal, but it also had inland valleys and deserts. If you've ever been to California, you know it has a wide variety of climates. It rains in the winter, summers are hot, and because it has these different geographical features, the coast, the valleys, the deserts, there's a lot of different options for food resources. For example, salmon, deer, nuts, berries, acorns were all common food items for these tribes. Now, their homes were typically made out of bark or constructed from thick woven red mats draped over cone-shaped poles, as you can see in this picture. They're using the resources around them in the forest to help create these structures. But all of California is not forest. So when we're talking about these cultural groups, we're talking about the area as a whole, not an individual tribe. That's important to know. The next cultural group is the Northwest Coast. Again, on the map, you can see this covers the coast of Oregon, Washington, and up into parts of Canada. So again, it spans only along the coast. We're not looking inland in Oregon, Washington, or Canada, just the coast. There they had cold winters, cool summers, and lots of rain. They also have dense forests, which you can see in this photo to the left. Now for them, seafood was the main food source since they were located right on the coast. They would also live in wood houses that they would create from the surrounding natural resources, just like what they did with the totem poles. Our third group is the Plateau Cultural Group. Now this is located to the right of the Pacific Northwest group. So again, now we're looking inland. So this is north of the Great Basin Cultural Group, which we're going to talk about later. It has mountains of dense forest, but the central part is drier and it's covered by grass and sagebrush. Winters are long and cold, but the summers are mild and gentle. Now, the sagebrush isn't the best for farming. Their main food source is going to come from salmon. They have a lot of large local rivers that end up supplying them their main food source. This area is also known for their basket weaving. Again, a lot of these are qualities that we hear about with Native Americans, and we kind of just assume every group is similar in that way. But each group has specific things they're known for, specific culture they developed. Make sure we're noting those differences. So our fourth group is the Great Basin. This is located right below the plateau and to the right of California. Great Basin sits right between the Sierra Nevada mountains and the Rocky Mountains. When you have mountains on either side, it can be great in terms of climate. It will block the rain. Some areas in the country have torrential downpour, leading to floods constantly. This area doesn't, but that leads to a mostly dry climate. They're going to have hot summers and cold winters. The drier your climate is, the more drastic it seems weather can be. Now, because of the dry area, they migrated for food in small groups. There's very limited food and water. So if you traveled in a larger group, you're not going to have enough to supply everybody in that group. So they migrated in small sections. That way when they would come across something, everyone could have it. Mainly they ate seeds, grasshoppers, and rabbits. Our next group is Southeast. Now Southeast spans from Texas to the Atlantic Ocean. So it has a lot of fertile coastal plains, river valleys, mountains, and swamps. For example, Florida is known for its swamps today. But the coastal plains are going to come in handy later on with the colonists and their farming. In this area there are long, warm, humid summers, but mild winters. Again, this allows for a long growing season, something that future colonists are going to use when they're growing crops such as cotton or tobacco. During this time, the Native Americans, though, are growing corn, beans, squash, sweet potatoes, and pumpkins. And they create their huts into the ground. Next is the Great Plains Cultural Group. This group is located between the Rocky Mountains and the Mississippi River. So they favor grazing animals such as bison or buffalo. As you see in this image, this was the idea that Americans had about Great Plains Indians, chasing after the buffaloes across vast open land. You can see mountains off in the distance, but they're not coming across mountains in their day-to-day life. They lived mainly in teepees, but would adjust their housing materials based on the weather. So if you lived in the north, you would live in a teepee covered with animal skin to help keep the warmth in. But if you lived in the south, you might be living in a teepee that's made more out of natural resources. Next is Southwest. Now the Southwest Cultural Group goes into a little bit of what is modern-day Mexico. It also consists of parts of Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado. The Southwest tends to be an image that comes to mind also when we think of Native Americans, because they lived in these adobe houses, which were built out of sun-dried brick. When these adobe houses would stack up, they would be called pueblos, which you can see in this picture here. The Southwest Cultural Group is also known for their irrigation. It's a dry area. They wouldn't be able to settle in these villages or pueblos if they didn't have irrigation. So they create intricate systems of irrigation to help make sure that they can grow food. Next is the Northeastern Woodlands, or just the Northeast. Now this is where New York is located. It's between the Mississippi River and the Appalachian Mountains, and it spans a very large area. Now, the Northeast had two main language groups, the Algonquians and the Iroquois. We know that Iroquois lived in long houses. And the Algonquians had similar structures. They were more circular rather than long. Another thing that you learned back in 4th grade was about the Iroquois League. Now this wasn't a European-style democracy or government, but it was a formal system meant to keep peace amongst the different chiefs. It was one of the first times that you could see an effort being made to have some sort of rule, some sort of universal peacemaking body. And this is going to be looked at as an example later on. Please make sure if you did not get all of the notes today that you go back and watch again. Again, make sure you have 3 details for each of the different cultural groups. We're going to be looking more at the geography of these areas tomorrow in class, so come with your notes ready. Enjoy the rest of your night, and I will see you tomorrow.